The little envelope sat on the kitchen counter, its cream color mocking me. I recognized the resort's logo emblazoned on the front, the same place Callum had booked for our 5th anniversary getaway. My hands trembled as I tore it open, the paper offering no resistance to my desperate fingers. I scanned the contents, my stomach dropping with each word I read. A romantic riverside bungalow, candlelight dinner, couples massage, all for 2 nights over our upcoming 10th anniversary weekend. The same weekend, Callum had claimed he needed to visit a client in Phoenix. "What is this?" I stammered out loud, praying there was some innocent explanation. Callum strolled into the kitchen, tucking his phone into his pocket with a look of surprise. "Oh, you got that already? It was supposed to be a surprise for our anniversary." My mouth went dry as I studied his casual demeanor. "A surprise? You already told me you had to work that weekend." He froze, his expression clouding over. "Work? I must have gotten my weekends mixed up." "Really? Then why did you lie about having to go to Phoenix?" I gestured at the damning envelope with a shaking hand. Callum's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Alara, baby, let me explain." "Don't baby me," I snapped, anger burning away the sting of betrayal. "Were you going to tell me about this little romantic getaway, or did you have another excuse lined up?" His jaw tightened and he dropped his gaze to the floor. In that moment, I knew. The solid ground had cracked open beneath my feet over the past months, but now I finally saw the truth staring back at me. Callum was having an affair. The realization knocked the wind out of me, leaving me doubled over. Tears started streaking down my cheeks as I fought for air. How could the man I loved, the man I'd built a life with, do this to me? To us? I can't believe you, I heaved out between ragged breaths. I need some air. Callum didn't protest as I pushed past him, grabbing my purse and keys on the way out the door. I climbed into my car, peeling out of the driveway in a squealing rage. Gulping down the dry Phoenix air, I turned up the radio loud to drown out my anguished thoughts. How long had this been going on? Who was she? The questions spun in my mind like a tornado of knives, each one twisting deeper into my heart. By the time I reached the Arizona Canal trails, the sun had dipped below the horizon. I parked and got out, needing the solitude of the darkening pathways to process everything. As I walked, I realized the signs had been there all along. His long nights at the office, his emotional distance, that strange charge on our credit card statement in Nevada. I spent the next few weeks in a fog, my mind replaying that awful night over and over. Callum's lame excuses and hollow promises only amplified the anger simmering inside me. I confided in my best friend Maya, spilling out the whole sordid tale over glasses of Cabernet. "That bastard," Maya spat after I finished, her eyes blazing with fury. "You don't deserve this, Alara. Not after everything you two have been through together." I nodded numbly, wiping away fresh tears. I don't know what to do. Part of me still loves him, but how can I ever trust him again? Maya leaned forward, gripping my hands tightly. "You can't. At least, not until you know the full truth. Cheaters like Callum always try to downplay things. Who knows what other lies he's told?" Her words ignited something inside me. She was right. If I was going to decide how to move forward, I needed the full, unvarnished reality of what Callum had done. The next morning, I started digging. I pulled our bank records, compiling a list of strange charges and cash withdrawals. There were dozens of them, hotel stays, jewelry purchases, even a night at a rental cabin near Sedona. Each unexplained entry felt like a slap across my face. I also began watching Callum more closely. His behavior continued to raise red flags. He started taking his phone everywhere, deleting texts frantically if I entered the room. Some nights he wouldn't come home until well after midnight, reeking of alcohol and cheap perfume. The final straw came when I was checking our phone records and noticed dozens of calls to the same number. Dialing it myself, an airy female voice answered. "Hello?" I froze, cradling the phone against my ear as my heart pounded violently. Who is this?" There was a horrified pause before the line went dead. I slowly lowered the phone, my breaths coming in ragged bursts. I didn't know who that woman was, but one thing was clear. I was done being the oblivious, jilted wife. That weekend, I followed Callum when he told me he was going to the gym. I trailed his BMW from a safe distance until he pulled into a luxury apartment complex downtown. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as fury boiled in my veins. Callum stepped out of his car, smoothing his shirt as a young, beautiful woman opened the door to greet him with an embrace. They kissed deeply before disappearing inside, his hand roaming shamelessly over her body. That's when I knew. I couldn't forgive this. Callum had shattered the sanctity of our vows, of everything we'd built over the past decade. An eye for an eye, he would get back everything he had ruthlessly taken from me and more. I pulled away, already formulating my plan. If Callum wanted to deceive and discard his family, I would make sure he paid the ultimate price. Several days passed as I mentally prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation with Callum. I pored over the evidence I'd gathered, bank statements, phone records, photos from his trysts. The pile grew thicker each day, a damning portrait of his betrayal. Finally, I could wait no longer. One evening, after he returned home late yet again, I cornered Callum in the living room. "We need to talk," I stated flatly, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched the manila envelope containing the proof. Callum looked up from his phone with a start. "What's going on?" "Don't play dumb with me." I tossed the envelope on the coffee table, the contents spilling out. "I know you've been cheating on me, with her." His eyes went wide as he frantically gathered the documents, realization dawning on his face. "Alara? I can explain." "Explain what?" I shot back, anger burning in my throat. "How you've been lying and sneaking around for God knows how long, spending our money on hotel rooms and gifts for your little tart?" Callum flinched, panic flashing across his features before being replaced with a mask of indifference. "You're overreacting. It was just a fling. It didn't mean anything." My jaw dropped at his callous dismissal. "Are you kidding me? You've been having an affair behind my back, and that's your excuse?" He rose from the couch, stepping towards me with his hands raised defensively. "Baby, you have to understand. Things haven't been good between us for a while now. This other woman, she made me feel wanted again in a way you haven't for years." The cruel words felt like a physical blow. My chest tightened as tears pricked my eyes. "How dare you?" Callum pressed on, his voice taking on a pleading tone laced with arrogance. "But it's over now, I swear. I ended things with her. Can't we just move past this and work on fixing us?" His audacity was simply staggering, as if months, years of infidelity could be simply swept under the rug by empty platitudes. Rage boiled over, uncorking years of resentment in one bitter torrent. "Fix this? There is no us anymore. Callum!" I shouted, closing the distance between us. "Not after how you've lied, cheated, and trampled all over the vows you promised me. You threw away everything we built together for some cheap thrill." His face hardened, hands curling into fists at his sides. "You're the one who checked out of this marriage long ago. At least I was man enough to admit I needed more." The heinous insinuation detonated the final shred of restraint I'd been clinging to. My hand clapped across his cheek before I could stop it, the sharp crack echoing through the room. We stood in tense silence, both of us breathing raggedly. Callum raised a hand to his stinging face, his expression a mixture of shock and hatred. In that moment, I realized there was no coming back from this. My husband, my life partner, had willingly eviscerated everything we once shared. As he stormed off to the spare bedroom, I knew deep down our relationship was already over. This callous, selfish man was a stranger to me. I felt no sadness, only a cold sense of resolve. If Callum was willing to discard his family so casually, then so be it. He would pay dearly for his transgressions. I would make certain of it. In the days following our explosive confrontation, Callum and I drifted into an icy coexistence. He stayed out most nights, returning home only to grab fresh clothes before vanishing again. I barely acknowledged his presence, going about my routine with a stoic detachment. Beneath that facade, however, a burning fury simmered. Callum's callous treatment, his smug indifference to the pain he'd inflicted, it was unforgivable. He had to be made to understand the grave consequences of his actions. One evening, I met up with Maya over drinks. I spilled out the entire ugly episode out, tears of rage stinging my eyes. She listened in stunned silence until I finished, her expression hardening into grim resolution. "That selfish prick," she growled, slamming her fist on the table. "He doesn't deserve an ounce of your mercy after how he's treated you." I nodded, anger creasing the corners of my mouth into a scowl. "You're right. I'm done being the sad, jilted wife. It's time Callum got a taste of the pain and humiliation he's put me through. That Maya's lips curved into a vindictive smile. So make him suffer like he's suffering you. Strip away everything that's important to that scumbag. His money, his reputation, that little side piece. Her words catalyzed a cold clarity in my mind. If Callum was willing to throw away our decade of marriage over some tawdry fling, I would dismantle his entire life piece by piece. No more being the victim. It was time to fight fire with hellfire. Over the next few weeks, I began methodically gathering ammunition for my counterattack. I sought legal counsel to begin divorce proceedings, ensuring my finances would be fully separated from Callum's. I also opened a private email account to begin documenting his affair and other misdeeds. The dam truly burst open when I secured copies of his work emails and correspondences. Buried among the mundane real estate minutiae were extensive records of under-the-table dealings, kickbacks, shady property transfers, the works. A vile smirk crossed my lips as I read through the incriminating paper trail. Callum's beloved career was first on the chopping block. My next step was locating the identity of his mistress. It didn't take much digging. A simple license plate lookup revealed her name was Sienna Westbrook, a former model who now managed a high-end beauty salon. Social media turned up photos of her in various states of undress, brazenly hanging off Callum's arm at nightclubs and holiday getaways. I sneered at the leering images, any pity I'd felt evaporating. This woman knew exactly what she was doing, shamelessly seducing another woman's husband. She was just as guilty as Callum, a viper who deserved to have her world crumble. A few keystrokes revealed Sienna was married to a wealthy financier named Grant. I chuckled darkly, already anticipating the devastated look on both their smug faces when I exposed their sordid tryst. How fitting for them to reap the bitter harvest of deceit and betrayal they had so greedily sown. With my plan solidified, I felt the icy pall of anger transmute into an electrifying sense of purpose. I would strike with surgical precision, dismantling Callum's life from every angle until he had nothing left. Only then would he finally grasp the obliterating damage he'd inflicted on the person who had loved him most. He wanted to trade in his family for cheap thrills? So be it. I would make sure Callum's unforgivable choices tarnished every aspect of the life he clearly took for granted. An eye for an eye. With my dossier on Callum's misdeeds compiled, it was time to initiate my intricate plan of retribution. I started by slipping an anonymous tip to the Arizona Real Estate Board about his unscrupulous business practices. Within days, their investigators had subpoenaed reams of his communications and records. "They're really giving me the third degree over at the office," Callum grumbled one evening as we passed like ghosts in the living room. A smug satisfaction crept over me watching him squirm. "Is that so?" I replied coolly, keeping my expression neutral. "I'm sure if you have nothing to hide, you'll be just fine." He shot me a withering glare before storming out the front door. I chuckled to myself. He was in for a very rude awakening. Next, I turned my sights on dismantling his tawdry romance with Sienna. I spent hours canvassing the online environs she frequented, Instagram, Facebook, even a risque OnlyFans page. I messaged her from an anonymous account, poking and prodding until she inevitably slipped up with some offhand mention of her married boyfriend. Within days, I had compiled enough incriminating screenshots and testimonies to bury them both. I snail-mailed a hefty bundle to Sienna's husband Grant, including some tacky lingerie shots and a short but impactful note. "Your wife has been cheating on you with my husband for over a year now. You deserve to know the truth about the kind of people they really are." A week later, the fireworks began. Callum's phone started ringing off the hook with blocked numbers I knew were from Grant. His jaw tightened into a scowl as the barrage continued, hints of panic creeping into his eyes. "I'd answer that if I were you." I taunted with mock sweetness. Could be important. Whipping the phone to his ear, Callum's face drained of color, as he was no doubt lambasted by the betrayed husband. That evening, I had Maya get us a table at a swanky restaurant downtown, the type with a view overlooking the street below. Right on cue, Sienna's cherry-red Mustang pulled up to the valet, her sleek form slinking out in a tight bandaged dress. A moment later, a furious Grant came storming out the lobby doors, grabbing her by the arm and delivering what looked like a vicious slap across her shocked face. I raised a glass of celebratory wine to my lips, delighting in the public humiliation playing out below. Let them have a taste of the abject embarrassment Callum had forced on me. Things accelerated quickly over the next few days. Sienna's social media was scrubbed, likely by her husband's legal team. Her OnlyFans and accounts went dark as the scandal became public knowledge. Then came the final knock, Callum's termination from his cushy real estate career. He trudged in one evening, his usual confidence shattered into a million pieces. They fired me, he stammered out, daring to meet my gaze. Cleared out my desk and everything, said there was too much smoke around my dealings for the company's reputation. I crossed my arms, letting the silence linger and allowing his anguish to fester. Well, that's too bad. I'm sure you'll land on your feet somewhere. Callum's expression contorted with rage as he realized I was the architect behind his sudden, brutal downfall. Without a word, he grabbed a half-empty bottle of whiskey and retreated to the guest bedroom, the shattering of glass soon echoing through the house. I smiled thinly, surveying my handiwork. This was only the beginning. Callum's torment had just started. By the time I was through, he would have as much left as he had given me. Nothing. Over the next few weeks, Callum's life continued its free-fall trajectory. The real estate board's investigation resulted in him being permanently barred from practicing his license, ending any hope of finding work in that field. His money rapidly drained away, paying legal fees and settling lawsuits. I watched in silent satisfaction as his typical arrogance withered into a pathetic, broken shell of a man. He began drinking heavily, spending nights passed out on the couch amid scattered bottles and reminders of his shattered existence. "How could you do this to me?" he slurred one evening, his words thick with self-pity. "After everything we meant to each other." I leveled an icy glare at his disheveled, unshaven face. "I simply gave you a taste of your own medicine. You embraced lies and betrayal, and this is the consequence." Callum's lips curled into a sneer. "You're a vindictive bitch, you know that?" Rather than rising to his bait, I simply shrugged. Says the man who threw away a decade of marriage for a cheap fling. I'm just the one who ensured you paid the full price for your indiscretions. As his spiral deepened, Callum turned to me with an almost laughable desperation, seemingly unaware of the magnitude of destruction I'd inflicted. "Alara, please. You have to help me," he begged one morning, trailing me into the kitchen with his hands clasped. "I'll do anything. I've hit rock bottom here." I slowly turned to face him, coldly drinking in his ruined visage, the puffy eyes, unkempt hair, rumpled clothes. This arrogant, selfish prick who had so casually betrayed me was now a sniveling wreck. A cruel smile played across my lips. "Help you?" I echoed. "Why would I possibly want to do that? You're exactly where you deserve to be, destitute and alone." Callum's face contorted with anger, his fist clenching. For a fleeting moment, I thought he might strike me, but just as quickly the bluster faded back into sullen defeat. "You're right, I had this coming," he mumbled, shrinking back. "I never deserved you." I watched impassively as he shuffled out, not sparing him a second thought. Callum had been the architect of his own demise from the moment he willingly shattered our marital vows with his callous infidelity. To her credit, Sienna didn't go down quite as easily. The former model adopted a defiant social media campaign, decrying the slut-shaming and misogyny she claimed to be a victim of after having her tryst with Callum exposed. I almost admired her arrogant shamelessness. That bravado disintegrated when the IPO her husband oversaw started circling the drains, his career obliterated by the very scandal she sparked. Within weeks, she went from poolside cabana selfies to hawking cheapy sewn lip glosses on Instagram. Her famous assets couldn't even save her the ultimate indignity. A salacious video surfaced of Grant berating Sienna before their bewildered staff, calling her a whore and homewrecker before flinging her belongings onto the driveway. Her humiliation was total and inescapable. Throughout it all, I remained the intentionally invisible puppet master, never publicly acknowledging my role in orchestrating the spectacular ruinings of Callum and Sienna's lives. Let them writhe amid the chaos and destruction they had brought upon themselves. As the weeks dragged on, Callum became little more than a haunting specter in what had once been our home. The lights remained off for days, the shades drawn against the harsh sun. My once vibrant, confident husband had degenerated into a husk. I watched him disappear inside himself, partaking only in the basic routines required to remain nominally functional. His life was effectively over, just as he had discarded ours for his selfish desires. With a graphic designer's appreciation for delicious irony, I marveled at how Callum had become the living embodiment of karma itself, consumed from the inside out by his own arrogance, betrayal, and misdeeds. Justice had finally found him. As Callum's life continued crumbling around him, a part of me still couldn't quite believe how far my vengeance had taken us. There was a time when I thought his infidelity would break me, that I'd be the one left shattered. Instead, I had become the brutally efficient architect of his undoing. Still, I knew there were a few remaining threads to sever before I could finally disentangle myself once and for all. The longest outstanding issue remained the official dissolution of our marriage. One evening, while Callum nursed a glass of bottom-shelf whiskey, I dropped a manila envelope on the coffee table in front of him with a dull thud. He stared at it blearily for a long moment before finally meeting my gaze. "What's this?" he asked, a hoarse croak. "Divorce papers," I stated flatly. "I'm filing for divorce on grounds of infidelity and abandonment. Given everything that's happened, I didn't think you'd put up much of a fight." Callum's brow furrowed as he rifled through the stack of documents with a trembling hand. A hollow, haunted look filled his eyes as realization set in. This was truly the end of everything we'd built together over the past decade. Any faint sliver of hope he'd harbored was finally extinguished. "You're really doing this," he murmured, more to himself than me. "Christ, Alara, when did everything go so wrong between us?" I felt a pang of something, sadness, perhaps remorse, before instantly quashing it like an insect underfoot. "When you decided your vows, your commitment to me, no longer meant anything. That's when our marriage died." Callum opened his mouth to reply, but seemed to think better of it. We both knew there was no justification, no excuse that could make what he'd done right. His utter silence was admission of that fact. Just sign the papers, and let's make this as clean as we can," I continued curtly. "You've put me through enough torture already." With a resigned nod, Callum scrawled his name across the thick stack of documents with a finality that reverberated through me like a shockwave. It was done. A decade of partnership, experiences and memories unceremoniously dissolved on a few sheets of ink and pulp. "There," he mumbled, tossing the pen aside. "After everything I've put you through, I don't blame you for wanting out, not one bit." Something in his deflated tone triggered a wellspring of anger and resentment I didn't realize I'd been suppressing. Before I could stop myself, the words came tumbling out in a torrent. "You're damn right you don't," I spat. "Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences for how despicably you treated me? That you could have your sexy little fling on the side while keeping me as your doting, oblivious wife at home?" Callum shrank back, his expression twisting in remorse. "Alara, No," I snapped, feeling years of hurt and rage rushing to the surface. "You don't get to make this all about your guilt or regret. You want to know what the hardest part of your betrayal was?" He stared back at me, my words rendering him uncharacteristically mute. "It was the harsh truth your actions revealed about the person I thought you were," I continued, my voice dripping with disdain. "The man I loved, the man I shared a life with, that person was a lie. You were just another selfish, entitled prick all along." I could see the impact of each lash landing, Callum visibly wilting under the weight of his misdeeds being thrown back in his face. Good. He deserved to feel the pain he dished out tenfold. "So yeah, I made sure you got exactly what you deserved," I hissed. "I systematically burned your life to the ground just like you did to our marriage. Maybe next time you'll think twice about carelessly betraying the person who loved you most." Leaving Callum shaken and hollowed out on the couch, I snatched up the signed divorce papers and stormed out. With those documents, the last legal tether keeping us bound was finally severed. He was out of my life for good. As I climbed into my car, the night air washing over me, an overwhelming sense of release washed over me. The crushing emotional weight I'd been carrying for so long finally sloughed off like a heavy overcoat. My plan for vengeance had been executed flawlessly, and I could finally begin moving forward untethered by the ghosts of my failed marriage. Callum got what he deserved. Now, at long last, it was time for me to start living again. With Callum officially extricated from my life, I felt an enormous weight lift off my shoulders. The divorce had been finalized, severing any remaining legal ties between us. He could no longer leech off me emotionally or financially. Despite the vindictive satisfaction I derived from orchestrating his downfall, I knew dwelling on Callum's betrayal any longer would only poison me further. It was time to refocus my energy inward on myself and charting a fresh path forward. I channeled my efforts into work, attacking new graphic design projects with a zeal that impressed even my most demanding clients. Staying busy kept my mind from drifting to darker places. The validation of creating something tangible, something I could point to as my own, helped restore my shaken sense of self-worth. In my downtime, I reconnected with Maya and other friends I'd drifted away from as my marriage slowly disintegrated. I realized how much I had deprived myself of their caring company and counsel during my increasingly isolated existence with Callum. "You've got your sly smile back," has Maya observed with a grin one evening as we split a bottle of crisp Sauvignon Blanc over Turkish mezzis. "I'm glad that asshole's negative energy isn't weighing on you anymore." I gave an acknowledging nod, feeling a contented warmth wash over me. "You were right. Once I stopped being a victim and took control, I got my power back. Funny how that works, isn't it?" Maya raised her glass with a wry smirk. "To the new independent you, may you only go from strength to strength from here." "I'll drink to that," I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. With each passing week, I felt more grounded and secure in my new reality. The betrayal pangs faded, replaced with a sense of hard-earned wisdom. While Callum's affair had nearly broken me at first, in the end it had shattered the rose-tinted lenses through which I'd viewed our relationship. The cold truth was, he had never been the upstanding man worthy of my faith that I believed. Once I'd peeled away that comfortable illusion, it became easier to accept the relationship for the unhealthy, toxic pairing it truly was. I had simply outgrown Callum and the stunted life we had built together long ago. In many ways, his infidelity had been a painful but necessary wake-up call, freeing me to pursue my own path. I took pride in the gutsy way I'd faced his transgressions head-on rather than wallow in impotent hurt. I had reclaimed my voice, my identity, my future. The hits also kept on coming for Callum in the months that followed. His money drained away, attorneys stripping him of any remaining assets. It wasn't long before he was forced to downgrade to a dingy, roach-infested apartment near the bad part of town. I couldn't help but smirk, knowing he was experiencing just a fraction of the humiliation and rock bottom he'd forced upon me. He called me one night in a drunken desperation, pleading for help to get back on his feet. "Please, Alara, I'm at the end of my rope here," he slurred over the janky line. "I'm a broken man. You have to throw me a lifeline for old time's sake." I stared at the phone for a long moment, reminiscing over our fractured history. So many hopes and dreams, so much time and energy invested in holding together a fundamentally rotten core. We had been far too mismatched and dysfunctional to ever truly make things work long-term. My lips curved into a sardonic smile as I hit the end call button, letting the line go dead silent. Callum had made his choices, reaping the consequences of his sordid actions. I owed him nothing, no more second chances, no more benefit of the doubt. He was on his own now, left to wither among the ashes of his selfish decisions. As for me, my future was finally free and unobstructed, filled with possibilities and a renewed vigor for life. No longer would I be shackled to the past and its ghosts. I had reclaimed my existence. Nothing would hold me back now.